All right, so with all this talk about Apple Music and then hi-fi, sci-fi, um, music quality being much more than just the regular MP3. Um, it's not necessarily like a new thing. Um, there's more videos on what's the DAC, what's the NAMP, how do you get this uh, FLAC or these lossless files and things of this nature. And they're not necessarily new, but it's more present than before because of Apple's announcement a few weeks or a couple of weeks back that now Apple Music is going to be supporting these types of files, these high quality audio files. Now, it is very interesting to note the reactions because you have people who are already audiophiles who, they already have their equipment and they already know what to do with it. They already are listening to high quality files. But for the people like me who had no idea until recently, and I'll be honest, I didn't really know anything about audio until maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, as I was looking into getting a new pair of headphones, and then I started going down this rabbit hole of how do you get the maximum experience, and then the high-end headphones, which are not like the AirPods Max, for example. They are 550 and they are Bluetooth. No, I'm talking about the wired headsets that are so power hungry that you can't plug them into your headphone. And some of them even have like the 4.4 millimeter plugs that go into a jack, that type of thing. So it can get very confusing, it can get a little bit overwhelming. So I'm just trying to give like an overview of what I understand it to be, and kind of I wanted to talk a little bit about my own very limited experience on a relatively low budget, because these things can be expensive. And so with the difference between the lossless files and then the lossy files that they call it. Lossy files are those that are the files themselves have been compressed, so information has been taken out from it so that they can be megabytes or even smaller. That way, it can be handled through either like Bluetooth, or you can stream it and it doesn't weigh in heavily into your internet usage and all of that, your data consumption. Because, before, if you remember, uh, what was standard were audio tapes. And then it began to be that when more information was required and that, it was a better sound, you had CDs. And that was the thing. That was, wow, impressive. I used to have a CD player that I was fascinated by because you only put batteries in and you can listen it to anywhere you wanted. Of course, I had like a cheap CD player, and the downside was that if you were moving around and you were shifting position of the CD player, then there were certain positions in which the CD stopped running, they stopped spinning, and so you would have these like, I don't want to say gaps, but it would like skip the track, and you had to leave the CD player in a single position. You can move around with it, but you have to leave it either vertical or horizontal, but you can move it around, right? But then we got into the digital age with MP3s, and that's when we got the infamous iPod and the MP3 players from everybody else, and it's like the files that we've been using today. And now, before the internet, it was very slow. If you remember, like having to use um, what was it, your phone, and so you either use the phone or you use internet. You couldn't use both. Those were like the dark ages of the internet. But uh you have that, but and also you couldn't handle that much data with the signals. But now today we are actually capable of sending and receiving up to gigabytes of information. So why am I saying all of this? Because now being able to handle much more data than before, we can now get into these higher quality files that are, instead of the regular, 2 megabytes or 3 megabytes or whatever it is, now you can have files that are even, hundreds of megabytes. Why? Because now we can handle that sort of data. And so lossless are, like the name implies, you don't lose any data and you handle that information as it is. However, it's not that you have that file and you can just listen it to in any device or with any headphone. It has to go through a chain of devices, or like several checkpoints, you could say. So you have the file, regardless of the quality of file. It has to go through like a DAC or an amp, and a DAC is just basically, it converts that, zeros and ones from the digital information into the signals that goes into the earphones that you hear as sounds. Um, Obviously, because it makes the driver, which is like this membrane inside headphones, move, like bounce around and whatnot, and that's what causes the airwaves, which we detect as sound. That's kind of how that works. But there's also the amplifiers that will make it even stronger, and so we could actually listen to the actual volume. Now, we have several points. You have the files themselves, but then you have the device. You have, like, if it's a phone, or there's some actually portable players as well that have this. And so, depending on how much information it is allowed to output, to send, then that's kind of like what you're going to be handling. So you could have a high quality audio file, but if you're using, you know, like a smartphone, for example, or a cheap MP3 player, they might be restricted by how much information they can put out. And so that will affect the quality. You also have the issue with, smartphones and other devices. They have their own DACs, that converter from the zeros and ones into the electrical signals for the earphone. They also have different quality, so that also affects the quality of the sound. If it has an amp, that also affects how loud or how low you can hear it. And you have the earphone itself, because not all earphones are made the same. And so the difference is that with cheaper headsets, you might not be able to listen to that much, because again, when those electrical signals go to the earphones or to the headphones, they have something called a driver. And if that driver is not capable of making all the sounds you need to, that you need it to make, then you're not going to be listening to that much. And so there's several checkpoints that you have to consider when looking at the files, the audio files in and of itself. And so kind of like, for me, the easiest way to know is that, or to look at it, is that you have the different checkpoints. You have the files, you have the device that's actually going to be outputting that signal to the earphones or the headphones, and then you have the earphones and headphones themselves. The way that I have kind of looked into this is actually through, well, what I'm using right now. And so when I was looking into the different headsets, something that I began to realize is that there's a difference between having a headset, an earphone that is wired, that uses a wire, like a 3.5 um, uh, jack, or if it's a wireless headphone or an earphone. When it's wireless, when it's sending everything through Bluetooth or through NFC, these signals over the air don't handle that much data, at least not yet, not for the meantime. And so it's going to be a lower quality compared to the wired. It's not to say that you don't get good quality, but there is a difference. wired, since you're directly sending that signal not through the air but through a cable that goes straight into the earphone, the headset. It usually ends up with better quality. And two other things I've noticed is that if you need to change a couple of things, let's say you want to change the cable, you can. Or if you want to, even the cost. Wired headsets are less expensive than the wireless ones. And it's not to say, for example, that $100 headset is the same value as $100 wireless headset. That is not the case, because a $100 headset can be equally as good as one that costs, the wireless version of 200, 300, even 400, I would say. Again, I'm not an audiophile, so I can't really make that for sure, say that for sure, but that's kind of how I see it. And so one thing that has drawn my attention are the IEMs, the in-ear monitors. The difference with these is that the regular earbuds, you put them on and everything, but the in-ear monitors have different tuning. So some of them will give you more of a thump, like the more of the what we would say in Spanish is punches. So the or the punches. I don't know how that's going to sound over here on the microphone, but you have some that are going to be more focused on the voice rather than on the bass. So they're going to be more on the, on what they call the treble. So more like the higher, the squeakiness, that sort of thing. You're going to sound that they are going to be a little bit more neutral, as they say, meaning that the volume between the bass and the voice and the mid-section, which is where most of the instruments like the violin or like the piano or the guitar, where those are going to be located, is not going to be like one volume overcomes the other ones. It's going to be about roughly the same. Not exactly, but roughly. The headset that I have here in the background, the Moondrop Circle. Now Moondrop is a Chinese brand. They actually make pretty good products. They're not knockoffs, they're not trying to copy anybody. They're their own product, and they make pretty good earphones. And not just earphones, they also do other audio related products. These are the ones I ended up buying because, after so much reviews, I'm not interested in having that heavy thumping of that. Like, for me, it's more important to be able to distinguish the voices and to be able to appreciate the music with the midsection. And I'll be kind of honest, when I wore them the first time, I was impressed because I was starting to hear different things I haven't heard before. And when I combined them with this DAC, which is what I have here on the left, that one is from Theo, which is the BTR5. And as you can tell, you can see a pair of earbuds that are connected to it on one side. The other side, it has a USB-C, so you can connect it either straight to the computer or straight into a phone that uses USB-C. So it wouldn't necessarily be for iPhones. You could use it for iPhones. You would just need an adapter that goes from Lightning to USB-C. But either way, I mean, this is a portable DAC amp. So it does both things. It amplifies the sound of the audio, but it also converts the signals from the zeros and ones into the electrical signals that go into the earphones. This one works either wired, or you can pair it by Bluetooth or NFC. So it can be wireless or wired. It works the same. From experience, the only difference is the audio is louder when you're using it wired, so you might have a lower volume. And when you're using it as wireless, then you might want to kind of raise the volume a little bit. And that's kind of like the brilliance about this machine, because you can raise the volume using, if you're using a cell phone or computer or whatever, you can control it there. And then if you want to adjust it a little bit, you can go over to the BTR5, and it also lowers the volume or it raises it. But it's in very small increments. So it's not going to be like one press of the button and everything is loud, and then the other press of the button is everything is low. But you can kind of raise it up a little bit, and you can do like a more fine adjustment of the volume using the BTR5. Um, Again, this is just kind of like an example from my own experience, what I have been using. So I can say, that's kind of how that works. And the one thing that I noticed using this is that, well, it really does change things, because using pairing the starfields, which already they have a good sound, they are already changing, you know, and it's kind of hard to explain, because it's not that I wasn't listening to anything before, but it's more like it opens up how much sounds you're getting from what you're listening to. With the BTR5, you hear even more things in the background. And so I enjoy kind of like either hearing the music or listening to a movie. One of the things that I have noticed is that in some music, and I have my own audio library, and music I've been listening to for many years. All of a sudden, there were songs where I was listening to these minor details, like the cymbals or the little rattle, or like the little thump of the drums that are maybe like on the right side or on the left. And it was clear, and I have never heard those sounds in those songs before. It was like I was hearing a different song altogether. And so the last thing I wanted to do was change the cable, because I liked the cable was fine on the Starfield. The only thing is that I found it tangles up a lot, and I even learned how to wrap them up in a different way, and still I would have issues with the wire getting tangled with the earbuds. So I went ahead and bought a different cable. But this cable that I bought, if you can tell on the lower right hand side, you can see like there's two connectors, and if you can, and I don't think you can really see them that well, but they have two pins. Those are what actually go and connect themselves into the earphones, because the earphones can have different type of connectors, and these ones use two pins. But where it gets connected to the actual device, that usually it's a 3.5 millimeter. So that's like the standard plug-in for the headphone jack. This one is a 2.5, so it's slightly smaller and more narrower. So the diameter of the pin or of the connector is smaller. What this does, as I found out, is that the BTR5 has two connectors, one for the standard 3.5, but it also has a balanced connection for a 2.5. I connected it to the balanced 2.5, and oh boy, the sound is louder. It's not that it's it does make a small difference, but the sound quality is still great. I'm still listening to that range of sounds. However, they do sound louder. And so, just to kind of pinpoint the difference, with the regular connection, the regular 3.5, connected straight into the computer or straight into the phone, well, to the computer, to be more, be more exact. With the computer, I go up to, when it's connected, up to 48%, more or less. When it's from Bluetooth, but still with the 3.5, I might raise it up to 54. However, with the 2.5 using the wired connection. And again, it's connected into the BTR5, but the BTR5 is connected to the computer. Now I'm listening because it doesn't have the plug-in for the 2.5, doesn't have that jack. The volume is now at either 38 or 36. And when it's wireless, I have to raise it up to maybe a 48. But it does make a difference. It does sound louder. The sound is much. It's kind of hard to explain it, and that's why it can get a little confusing listening to audiophiles saying, "Oh, it's deeper, it's crispier, it's this." Like it sounds like they're talking about food, but all it is that, with these headphones, I hear more sounds. With the cable, they're louder, but with the BTR5, those sounds are actually more present. So not only do I hear more sounds, but I can actually hear where they're coming from. Left, right, if it's coming up or down. It doesn't show me if it's in front or behind, but that's kind of like the idea. You hear more sound. And I appreciate my files, even if they're MP3, they sound great. If I'm listening to a higher quality, they also sound great. And I enjoy movies more. The songs sound like they're new songs that I've never heard before. And it really does make a difference. And, because audiophile products can be very expensive, the combination of the earphones, the cable, and the BTR5 cost me around $260. It sounds like a lot, but compare that to the AirPods Max. Compare that to the Sony, the XM4s. Compare them to a Sennheiser or to a Bose. Those are usually 400 and so forth. And so for about half the cost, I got 3 different products, and they sound great. They sound very, very great. Now, that's just my opinion. That's how I understand the audio to work. And, just like in the background, sound is golden. That's the way I can describe everything. All right. It sounds like I went on a rant for a little bit, but, here it is. That's my opinion. Feel free to comment on whatever you feel. And see you in the next one. Bye-bye.